Hello, everyone. Welcome to Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. This is Cody. I'm here with my momentary friend Justin. That may change in about 10 minutes. We'll see. But we're going to be talking about the big announcement of the Nintendo Switch 2 that came out this past week. And we have lots of thoughts on that regarding all sorts of things involving it, which we'll get to.
Indeed.
But let's give my fair-voiced friend here a chance to tell us what he's been up to. Justin, how you
Uh,
been?
Despite how my voice sounds, I've been okay. Uh, I went to one of the many, many protests that were going on across the country today, and a lot of yelling involved. And which, if I sound a bit froggy or whatever, that is why I'm a little surprised I have a voice at this point. But here we are. Um, I as some of you may know, I live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and not a terribly populous area. And I don't think I've ever seen that many residents of the town that I live in together in one place for anything. Um, we met kind of like downtown in the Commons area, and started the march through essentially one entire city block's worth of streets. So, all four directions. I was towards the front of the group. My wife and I were towards the front of the group. And by the time we got back to the starting area, there was a mass of people that hadn't even begun the march yet. There were that's how many people there were. And it was very heartening to see, simply because, like I said, we're not a big city. We're not a big, not by any stretch of the imagination. And if we had that kind of turnout here, I can only imagine something like New York or, any major metropolitan area. It just had to have been going for hours. And I hope it amounts to something. So that's kind of the major big thing recently for me. Uh, Other than that, in terms of like a less boisterous kind of activity, um, recently there have been, I don't remember if it was going through my YouTube feed or Facebook, but somehow I learned about a little indie game called oh, sorry, there was a strange noise in the background there.
That was
Um,
weird.
uh, yeah, a little indie game called Look Outside, which I don't want to say much about. It is very much an indie title. I think published by Devolver Digital. I think it's only available on PC right now, but most things should be able to run it. And the basic premise is something terrible has happened, or maybe it hasn't. And whatever you do, you should not look outside, or maybe you should. Maybe everything is totally fine, or maybe it's horrible. Um, but basically, you are just cast as this guy in an apartment where something may or may not have happened to the entire world or just your area. It's not for me to say. And you have 2 weeks worth of time to either just hole yourself up or go exploring through your apartment complex, or maybe just go and see what it's like outside. Um,
What?
and it's a horror game. It is very much a horror game,
Okay.
and has some of the most creative and disturbing sprite work I've seen in anything in a pretty long time.
Hmm.
And I I'm loving it so far. I'm only maybe 4 hours in. Um, and I think I've got like 12 days left to go in the countdown. It's it's wild.
Hmm.
It ticks all the right boxes: cosmic horror, body horror, unreliable narrator. Just it's weird. It's wonderful. I would recommend checking it out. I don't think it's very expensive on Steam. Let me take a quick look here. But yeah, I stumbled across it and decided to give it a go. I'm very glad I did. Yeah, it's like $10 on Steam. So if you're at all curious and you have any sort of computer that can run anything, you can probably run this. I would highly recommend it. Um, so yeah, that's kind of it on my end for recent stuff. What about you, Cody?
It's interesting. This cool little game you got here. I didn't look at any photos yet, but it was just the concept sounds kind of intriguing.
It very
Um,
much is. I'd
oh
recommend
wow.
going in blind. Yeah, it's
I'm just seeing a couple. Hopefully, it's not too spoiler, but I saw like four screens just of artwork from it. It's got a kind of unique style from it.
mhm.
Let's see. Well, I'll just do a couple quick things here. One, maybe two quick things, one little longer thing. One is I went to the theater last night to see another movie off my top 10 most anticipated for the year, which I'm really attempting to make an effort to make sure I get all 10 in this year. Because looking back to like the last 2 years we did this, I never got all 10. And I was like, well, why didn't I get all 10? Because eventually everything comes to just, streaming or whatever. So there's really no excuse at some point to not watch the movie. But so I'm going to try to do that. But anyway, I ticked off my number eight movie, Death of a Unicorn, last night. I took my kids, and it's a horror comedy basically that has Paul Rudd as the dad and Jenna Ortega as the daughter. Some other famous people in it as well. Tia Leone, Will Poulter, and I forget who actually the patriarch of the family was. I don't know what that actor, but it was enjoyable. It was not great. And I kind of had read some reviews before we went, and I didn't really assume going into it that it would be great, but there was definitely some fun kills and definitely some little bit of tense atmosphere here and there, and still managed to pull off like a little bit of heartwarming family togetherness mixed with the very much greediness of a lot of rich families and companies and things that people will do anything to make new money and make new problems that they can solve and make money off of. So I'm pretty sure there's at least some economic commentary in there, if not some political commentary in there as well. But it was enjoyable. We had fun watching it. Like I said, not great, but quick number. I'd probably give that about a 6 out of 10. I did enjoy it. It was fun, but I don't think you would need to watch it twice. That's for sure. But there's some fun moments in it, and actually some really trippy sequences as well. That are like, I won't spoil too much, but there's definitely like some sequence where like you are like floating down a tunnel and there's like shit flying at your face really fast, and it's kind of fun and cosmic-y, and it's pretty fun. Beyond that, I'll just say really quickly here, tomorrow as we record this, but this will be before it comes out, there is another AEW pay-per-view, Dynasty, which I'm excited for. So I'll be watching some wrestling tomorrow from when we record this. New website, pinfallsandsubmissions.com, has been doing pretty gangbusters, built off what I had built with my old name, and I think we just got past 1,000 followers, so we're getting up there.
That's
So
nice.
yeah. And then last thing for 2 seconds, I will say I bought some. This is why you always got to make sure you spend money where it should be spent, ladies and gentlemen. You don't want to go cheap on things that really should have the proper amount of money dedicated to them when you're purchasing something new. I was at Menards back in like December-ish, January-ish, I forget. Now it's probably earlier. It could have been like November, December.
Mhm.
And they had knockoff Legos there in the toy aisle, and they had G.I. Joe knockoff Legos. So I was like, sweet. And they were like, so I got a set that you build a bike with like Snake Eyes, and I got a Cobra Commander one with the helicopter, and then a Storm Shadow one with some, I don't know what he has, an ATV or something. And they had bigger sets too you could build. There was like four tiny ones and like four bigger ones. And I'm talking like these were like $2 a box for like 45 pieces, like nothing, like literally dirt cheap. I think I bought all three sets I bought for like $6. And anyway, so Boston got some Legos for his birthday, and he was looking at them downstairs today. And I was like, well, I'll do some Legos with you. So I ran up and found that bag, which has just been laying literally in a shopping bag in my room since I bought it. And I brought him down, and wow, let me tell you what, you get what you pay for with some things, because some of the pieces don't even stick together. Some of them are like misshapen from a bad mold. You have to like assemble the minifigs yourself from like the insides out, and it was like a whole process. The most impressive part was probably honestly the stickers that they gave you to put on them, but I put two together while he worked, and they literally, like, if you touch them, I bet like seven pieces would fall off each one.
Oh,
Yeah, pretty
jeez.
pretty crappy. So it turns out, below Lego was like Mega Bloks, and below Mega Bloks is whatever this was called, like Creative Frontiers or something was the company I
Oof.
finally found in small print on the box, but it was not great. So
Even they were ashamed to admit what they made.
I mean, yes, I've even if the weird thing is like even for how crappy they were, I don't know how they're making money off of them at like $2 a box, but
Well, it's like how I really wonder how the local wrestling circuit ever like the performers actually made money off of that. So
yeah.
yeah. Oh,
All right. Well, let's get to the big news. PlayStation 6 has come out, guys. It's been announced. It's going to be $1,200 for the low grade system, 1,500 for the high grade system. Does
uh,
does come with a free copy of the original Resident Evil though. So,
I mean, they may as well. Sony's done fuck all with this console generation, so
all right. Well, we are here to talk about the Nintendo Switch 2, and we definitely, the chat we keep on the side, we have talked a little bit about some of the things in here. I don't know that we have full opinions from each other on what we're going to think about some of the things here tonight, but if you are a video gamer, this was a big moment whenever one of our companies puts out a new system, is kind of like that watershed generation moment, I guess, for us, as we've been watching and playing these things from most of our cases now close to 40 years or 40 years at this point. If you want to go back to, well, that's NES if you played Atari and stuff older than that even. So they definitely been around a long time. But anyway, so April 2nd, as we record this, 2025, is when the Nintendo Switch 2 was finally officially revealed. We all have known, of course, in the video game community that it was coming for some time. It was just a matter of, and they did like hold off announcing this officially for a weirdly long time, I will say.
they did. Yeah.
Um, so just for comparison's sake, I went back and dug around a little bit. October 20th of 2016 is when they announced the Switch. And the Switch 2 is going to come out officially on June 5th of this year, and the original Switch came out the following year, March 3rd. So there was really about 5 months, I would say, in between announcement and release for the Switch. Here they're doing just like a 2 month turnaround. Knock on wood, presumably hashtag tariffs we'll talk about. Yes. So in terms of like video game generations and thinking about how long you leave a system out for, that's always been kind of a fascinating thing for me to think about because we've had the three current systems. I mean, PlayStation, Microsoft, Nintendo. We had Sega in the background. We had Atari at one time. Not to mention we have like all these other systems now that can play like PC games and things of that nature. So the idea of like when you put out a new system is like you got to find the perfect time to do that. And I do feel like the Switch is getting a little longer in the tooth, but they have kept it around here for what will that be? It's just about 8 years and a couple months would be the
Yeah.
final time on this one.
Yeah,
So
that's a good long life for a gaming console.
yeah, because some only last I mean, some last like five.
hmm
You
You want
know,
to go
there's
back to like the Sega Saturn, that was like 3 years at most, and that's yeah, you want to avoid that if at all possible.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so yeah, it's I mean, I hadn't realized consciously that the Switch had actually been out for that long. That's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, it does seem hard to believe, honestly. Like my kids are, well, they just turned 11 and 14, but I mean, that means the Switch has basically been around their whole life, from when maybe they
Yeah.
saw me play a different system before that, but, essentially they grew up on this system and it's just been here forever. Um, but yeah, just kind of a little more on the intro here, I guess, before we talk about the new one, just thinking about like the Switch itself and its place in history will be kind of interesting. Nintendo, from a business model, really cannibalized itself when they put that out because it ended their handheld division, merging with the console division. So instead of selling two to everybody, they were selling one to everybody. Maybe at a slightly higher price point, maybe. But it did basically what it was advertised to do. It was really good at portable gaming. It was pretty good at console gaming hooked up to your TV. Um, Online play, while not, entirely developed, at least was a far jump in the right direction from their older systems that they had. If anything, I think maybe what you could criticize them for probably would be the Joy-Con drift for sure. When you're playing online, they still didn't have great options for like video and audio chat to people you're playing with. And then, of course, they can't necessarily run a lot of the AAA titles that other systems could, so they don't get the port that the other ones would get. So
Mhm.
everything else, though, I think they did pretty well on in terms of like first party exclusives and a ton of indie games on the system, and the online bringing back a lot of the older games that you could play through Nintendo for the different systems. I still only have the original online subscription. I never bought the upgraded one. I don't know if you have either one.
I have the basic one, so
Yeah.
with the NES and Super Nintendo games, but not the this Genesis or what's the other one they got? The Game Boy, I think was part of the expanded one.
Yeah, it might be Game Boy. Nintendo 64 is on there
Oh,
now.
yep, yep.
And there
And
were
soon,
some like TurboGrafx games. I don't know if those are on
oh,
the newer or the older, if you had to buy those, though. I don't
oh,
remember.
I'd have to go and check because I haven't actually looked at that in a while.
Yeah.
But
All
but
right,
yeah, and
let's
soon
see.
GameCube games with the expanded one.
Yeah,
So
pretty pretty crazy slash about time for that. So
yeah, yeah.
I didn't confirm this anywhere online, but I was thinking about this, and you tell me if you think this is correct or not. But I think the Nintendo Switch becomes the first system to ever play games from Nintendo, Sega, Microsoft, and Sony all on one system. Has to
That
be because Nintendo doesn't port their games to anybody else, right?
that is true. Yeah, I was thinking the only other possible contender would be PC, and yeah, like you said, Nintendo doesn't license their games like Sony does, or
Yeah.
yeah. So
Definitely
yeah.
not a ton of Microsoft games, Minecraft, and there's some other ones that come from there. And Sony, I think, really just a couple sports games, but
Mhm.
still, that's
Yeah,
notable.
it is. It
The
is.
original Switch is currently at 150 million units in its lifespan that it has sold, only behind the PS2. And I'm getting somewhat mixed reports if it's past the Nintendo DS. Some websites said yes for second place, some said it's just about there for second place.
Okay.
Um, they were only like 5 million behind the PS2. I don't know if you saw this. And then like several months ago, Sony was like, nah, we recalculated. It was 160. And everybody was like, okay, 5 million more on the record books. And it was like, you don't have to verify any of this anywhere? Okay.
Yeah, you think like the Guinness World Records people would want some sort of record keeping?
It's kind of strange, I will say. It's like, I don't
Yeah.
know. It's like when the WWE was like, no, we had 91,000 people there. We promise. And they're like, oh, okay. All right, towards the end of its lifespan here, like we said, we just had the original version. I think there was technically a second version of the original version that came out. I don't know exactly know what the difference was, if it was anything like technical inside, but I know they did switch the original base at some point. And then the OLED model, which we have one of those as well, and then also the Switch Lite as well, if you're just a portable gamer, which still baffles my mind why you would buy that one, but that's me. I mean, I guess maybe if you commute every day and it's cheaper, I don't know, maybe you would, but
Maybe. Yeah. It
boggles
still
my
seems
mind
silly.
that you like wouldn't want to pay the extra $50 to have the chance to hook it up to your TV though. I like that just boggles my mind, but
Yeah, considering like for me at least, that's pretty much the primary way I play anything on my Switch is hooked up to the TV. I almost never use the portable version.
yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about too, because I definitely would have said I was primarily on TV as well. And then probably the last 2, 3 years, I've really started to play it portable far. I wouldn't say more than I do on TV, but way more than I used to. It's nice when my kids would have like a music lesson or something. I could bring it and sit in the car with it. Or it kind of depends on the game too. Like as we were recently playing Rise of the Golden Idol, it's point and click. Like that's great for
Mm,
portable. I can lay in bed and play that pretty easily. So it just kind of depends what the game type is also, I guess.
fair.
All right, well, let's jump into this here today.
Okay.
So Nintendo Switch 2, boom, boom, boom.
Dun, dun,
We
dun, dun.
are, ba, ba, ba. Let's start off with the big announcements, and these are everywhere. So
Mhm.
we're going to start with specs and hardware. And let's well, I tell you what, instead of me rattling off a bunch of these specs that I have written down here to start, why don't you tell us some of your impressions from the initial announcements here on specs and hardware on this one?
Okay. So primarily what they provided us in terms of specs were what milestones to expect for performance. Like they talked about, say, Metroid, the new Metroid Prime. They said it should hit 60 FPS at 4K, and it should hit 100 or 120 FPS at 1080p. Which sounds great. And if they're able to do that, that is great. That's a significant amount of power. But if you try to like dig into anything concrete, like just even if you go, at least as of a few days ago, it may have changed, but as of a few days ago, if you even go to like the Nintendo Switch 2 site, it doesn't list really much of anything about it. It lists a quote unquote custom AMD CPU, which tells us literally nothing.
Yeah.
It doesn't list how much RAM it has. So really, all they're saying is "trust me, bro," and that really, that really, we've seen how that worked with Sony. They claimed that the PS4 could push 8K, and no, it couldn't. That was just a complete bullshit assertion, and I am very leery of any sort of claims of that sort without having the hardware specs to back it up. So if what they're saying is true, that's awesome. But it comes with a huge asterisk by it because we don't know anything about the guts of this thing yet. Aside from like how much onboard memory it has and like a handful of other things like the magnets for the Joy-Con stuff, but the actual horsepower, it's a giant question mark.
Yeah. I don't
So
disagree with anything you said there. That's for sure. There's a lot that we still don't know about this thing, whether Nintendo will be forthcoming with some of that, maybe, or maybe it's going to be just something that they don't really talk about. I don't know. But you are right, and that's, a concern for a lot of people, I will say, is I'm trying to put myself into a place here where I can like see this from a lot of different people's viewpoints rather than just completely blinded like I was coming to this wearing a Super Nintendo World shirt from Japan or something, which I am. So, um, yeah, we don't know. We just don't know about some of these things, like you said, what the power of this thing is, exactly what's going to make this thing run. Um, I don't know, and I would ask you, I guess, this idea of like, well, you can play it in 4K with 60 or 1080 with 120. Like, my question, I guess, I was going to ask you here tonight because I don't know these numbers quite as well.
sure.
If you have a choice of like you can play Metroid in 4K 60 or 1080 120, which would you pick? Like, what is the circumstance where I would choose one of these versus the other, these assuming that these are true?
Well, Joe is going to like just absolutely flay me for this, but I still only have a 1080p TV. So for me, the choice would be obvious. But if I did have access to 4K, then it's it's still a little tricky because 120 frames per second is very smooth. It is, I mean, having been a PC gamer for the last few years, yeah, it is. It's like butter when you can get something to run at that kind of frame rate. And 60 is not bad, but if you're doing something like a first-person shooter, which in a way the new Metroid Prime is,
Yeah.
it does help to have that fluidity. You can still probably aim fairly well with 60, especially if you can use the mouse controls with it for aiming. But oh God, 120 is nice.
Hmm.
So for me, yeah, obviously right now, easy choice, the 120 frames per second at 1080. But 4K also looks very, very impressive, very, very pretty. So I think just for the visual flair of it, I would at least be willing to give the 60 frames per second at 4K a try. Just
Okay.
because if this thing is able to generate that kind of output that looks that good, then it deserves to at least be experienced to see how it feels.
Yeah. Well,
So
we should point out too, obviously, but the handheld mode is not going to get you 4K there. So
no, no,
just
no.
to make sure we're all up on that, but
Mhm.
um, yeah. So some of the other things here, just kind of looking at this from a tech standpoint or maybe a raw product standpoint, the hardware, we have a 7.9-inch screen which I did notice in all of their presentations, they only are comparing to the original Switch, which is a little bit of rosy marketing because the LED, OLED has a bigger screen.
Hmm.
So I think the OLED tops out at like 7 inches, so it is still an inch bigger than that, which is
Mhm.
considerable.
Yeah.
But it is much bigger than the original Switch screen. But everything in the presentations, as some people correctly pointed out online, they don't seem to mention the OLED exists anywhere.
Yeah, it's which is interesting.
Yes. I know myself and some other people out there probably really were hoping that the launch was going to be an OLED, but it's not. However,
Mhm.
the trade-off with this we're getting, I guess, is they're really pushing the HDR with this one, with the LED, and the people that have played it so far basically have described it, from what I've read, as the black isn't quite as inky black as it would be on the OLED, but the colors are much more dynamic and vibrant with the new setup compared to the old setup, so they didn't really think it was a problem. And as a matter of fact, several websites I looked at said they actually preferred the way it looked on this versus the OLED. So I don't know.
Well, I can speak for HDR. It does make a difference. I mean, you come out of a cave into like a bright, you know, sunny beach or whatever. Yeah. The sunlight does look blindingly bright in comparison to what you just came out of. So if it's implemented right, HDR looks great. And I could see that compensating for the lack of OLED. Because yeah, if it does have to be implemented on like a game by game basis a lot of the time, but when it is done right, it looks fantastic.
Yeah, I don't know as far as I don't know. Just thinking about this one, I guess I wanted there to be an OLED out of the gate, and I was hoping it was going to be that natively. And and I will say even an irritating thing, and I do agree with a lot of people that I'm reading in like Reddit and other comment boards as well. Eventually Nintendo is going to put out the OLED version of this thing, and I'm like, God damn it!
Hmm.
So then it's a matter of I'm not going to
Wait,
wait
or
probably for that, but also let's just assume we'll talk price it towards the end of this, but let's just assume like what's the price for that model going to be then if it's going to be, another $100 more than this model or I don't know.
yeah,
Anyway,
hard to
all right,
say.
let's
Yeah.
just yeah, go ahead. You got something else there?
Oh, just going back to the fact that if you do play it docked, doesn't matter as much. But if you yeah, I could see it
That's
making a
true.
difference if you're a handheld player. Yeah.
Well, that's a great point too, because I don't always think about those things when I make these choices and comparisons because like I've said many times, we have two here. We have the old style one and we have the OLED and I as I said, mostly play on the TV, so I took the old one. I don't even fight the kids for the OLED because I don't need it. So whereas my daughter will sit in her room and play whatever Animal Crossing or whatever game she's on, Three Houses or whatever.
Nice.
Visually, what did you think of the reveal? It's kind of been leaked before this, but what did you think of how this model looks compared to the other one, or just in general?
It's it is distinct from the original Switch. I mean, the colors are more muted.
Yeah.
So I mean, there is that to distinguish it, but it almost kind of feels like the shift from the Wii to the Wii U in terms of visuals, because the Wii was just like a kind of a thin rectangle that stood on its own. Wii U was also kind of a thin rectangle that I guess laid flat more than stood on its own. But one was white, one was black, and otherwise they looked kind of similar if you ignore the like
Mm.
the big tablet controller. Um, so it's an interesting choice. I feel like they could have done more to make it look more like its own thing, and that might have helped a bit. But at a glance, I if you had just shown me one of these just on the street, and or I'd seen one on a shelf in like a display booth or something like that. If I hadn't if it hadn't had advertisement around it saying it was the Switch 2, I might have just thought it was another model or like a different color of the Switch 1.
Mm.
If I hadn't noticed the screen was a little bigger or whatever. And I could see that possibly being an issue for like consumers. Say you're a parent or a grandparent who wants to get this for your kid or grandkid, and maybe you're not as savvy on this sort of thing, and there's a chance you could accidentally buy the wrong one, which isn't going to do anyone any favors and could lead to frustration and animosity and that sort of thing. Um, as long as I guess you're informed, yeah, it's easy to tell the difference. But if you're just looking to get one around the holidays, and you're not paying attention, I could see it being a little confusing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. That being said, if 10 million of you would do that for us to raise that number past PS2, that'd be fantastic. I say us like I have any controlling interest in the company. I do not, but it does look pretty nice. I like that it seems to be like kind of a matte. It seems like it's more like a matte form, what's texture, I guess I'm
Mm.
saying, versus the like glossy. That was, one of the oddly, one of the memories I have of the Wii U is like how glossy it was and how much it showed fingerprints and things of that nature. It just was, it always looked dirty no matter what you did. It was, so I'm happy they went the other way with this one and learned from that mistake at least, if nothing else.
Mhm.
All right, let's see here. A couple people have had the chance to play this. Some companies out there that do reporting on these things. So I've looked at like Game Central and Metro, CNET, IGN, some other ones out there as well, and kind of read through what they have said about most of these initial experiences they have. And I think there is some kind of like, I didn't look into it really, some kind of like preview tour across America or something I think they're going to do where you can maybe get a chance to play some of these early or different modes or different peripheral and go into there. But generally speaking, it seems like they liked it. One of the CNET particular said they really liked how slim it was, basically saying it was the same width as the original Switch. And it felt like it was more portable than like the Steam Deck they compared it to in particular.
Okay.
The Joy-Cons, I think, have a little more width. I know they have a little more length because the screen's
Mhm.
bigger, and people have liked that so far because the other ones felt like a fucking tiny little thing in your hand.
Yeah.
IGN said it looked good on the TV mode and the console mode. I was watching one of their videos they had up reviewing everything they played. The buttons feel really good. They said the sticks feel good so far. We'll talk about that more in a second here.
Sure.
And they said the system felt like it was a premium product. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. So just looking ahead here, I had a couple other questions on this section, including, do we think Nintendo is going to convince people to invest in the next generation yet? Because this has been something that, in the last decade has been a bit of a struggle. Sony's doing okay. They're up to 71 million sold for the PS5. They had 117 for the PS4, so they'll probably get to the same benchmark, I would think, if not further. Xbox is doing terrible. They have
Yeah.
gone from 80 million in one generation to 56 in the last, down to
Oof.
30 in this one. So they are down to literally a third of what they had 2 generations ago, which is not the direction you want to be trending.
No. Um,
Oh.
but yeah, in terms of being convincing people to, uh, well, there's no other way to say it, to switch. Um, I I could see it. I could see several layers to this. The first being that they may have hamstrung themselves with the success of the Switch. Like tons of people have this thing,
Hmm.
and there's a gigantic library of games, especially like indie titles and the first party stuff that is the main draw that already exists, and it's a lot to get through. It's a lot to experience and enjoy. Uh, and it is so popular that it takes a lot to try and shift that base into something new. Um, and yes, there is the upgrade to 4K and such, but I don't know. Do we want to jump into like the comparison videos between like Switch versions of some games and like the Switch 2 versions right now, or do we want to save that till later?
Let's take a peek here. I think you could talk about that here, I think.
Okay. So if you look at, they've released a few of these, notably for like the Zelda games, at least Breath of the Wild. They might have done one for Tears of the Kingdom too. I am not 100% sure,
Okay.
but if you do them side by side, and there's like a bunch of these on like YouTube and I think IGN and stuff. It's got the the same scenes playing side by side, and it's not as bad as the ones that were comparing the PS5 to the PS5 Pro, but you still have to squint to see a lot of the differences.
Mm,
Like you can see like okay, there's a few like these textures are a little bit more defined, and the grass is a bit thicker here, and the draw distance. Okay, you can see stuff a bit further on in the background.
yeah.
Is it worth 450 or $500 for that level of upgrade though? And that's, I think, going to be a sticking point for a lot of people because there's no avoiding the fact that we're at a point technologically where the visual improvements are going to be, we've hit diminishing returns. There's no way around that.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
yes, yeah, and the Switch itself could benefit probably the most out of any of the current consoles, with a visual and horsepower overhaul. But what they've displayed in terms of like current versus upgraded version, I don't know if it's enough to justify nearly half a grand on a new piece of hardware. So it's tricky. I think really what's gonna shift the needle the most is they're really gonna have to hammer home the exclusives
Hmm.
and the partnerships with other companies. We can talk a little bit about that later because there's one big one that I know I'm thinking about,
Yeah.
but yeah, the hardware itself is they're going to have to avoid the same pitfall that Sony has fallen into, that where the PS5 has been out for what 4 years now.
Yep.
They're still making fucking games for the PS4.
Yeah. I was going to just say that. Yep.
So they have to avoid that. If they're going to get people to move on, they have to cut support for the Switch sooner rather than later. But on the other edge of that sword, that's going to cost them money because they have such an entrenched user base for the Switch One. So they're in a weird position right now where I don't know if there's a good strategy to get out of it. It's strange. But what do you think on all this?
It's a great point you bring up here because I was thinking about earlier, and you kind of actually hit the opposite side of this, I feel like, which is great, which is Nintendo of all companies here is making this big, I'm going to call it a big technological jump from where they were to where this new system would be. But as I have had countless arguments with you and Joe in the past, like Nintendo's consoles have never really cared that I mean, not in a long time at least, that their specs are up to what other people have around them. Like specs have never driven the sales of the Nintendo system in probably 4 generations. I guess it's been a while since they really truly tried to compete on that plateau. So they're the weakest one, but I mean, they've also sold the most. So obviously they have figured out this magic formula where they have these, cutesy characters and reliable franchises, and they have all these things that people love about the company, and they're going to come out and buy these things. So you're right in that you're kind of saying the other way around here. Nintendo is then asking people to invest money into a technological upgrade, maybe for the first time in a while, to play these games. I do think you're right, though. Like, it's no matter how this is marketed, it's going to have to be sold on the games that come out on it. And I'm glad you mentioned the PlayStation situation because, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if my numbers are accurate and they're really at 71 million versus 117 million, like, I guess you would need a third number there, which is how many people own both,
Hmm,
because that's not listed there. So
that's true. Yeah.
if they're saying they have 80 million unique PS4 users, then yes, I guess that's why you'd want to keep putting games out for it. But if there's an overlap of like 90%, then cut the
Yeah.
cord and move on.
Yeah. But I just going down that tangent road for just a second. A big part of that is there's hardly anything that's designed to take advantage of what power that system has because they keep making stuff to cater to both the older generation and this current one. So
Mm.
there's really no reason at all to move ahead because there's nothing unique to the PS5. Like there's 5 games maybe that and
Wow. Okay.
yeah, it's very few in terms of ones that aren't available either on the PS4 or like on PC or also on Xbox or whatever. And it's just yeah, I for life of me, I don't understand the craze that was surrounding the PS5 when it came out because then it barely had anything, and now these 4 years later or whatever, it still barely has anything. So anyway, that's it for that tangent. I just wanted to
No,
comment on that
just to
because
remind me, what systems do you have right now that are like your current systems?
I still have a PS4. I
Okay.
have a Switch, and but primarily I'm a PC gamer.
Okay.
This
So you
this
never got the PS5 and
Nope, and I'm
never.
not
Okay.
not regretting it. So
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move into kind of like the what do I want to say here? The I called it the peripherals and control options for lack of a more graceful segment here, but kind of thinking about like what's different about the actual abilities of this system than the old one, where they may have improved, what they may have added, etc. And let's go into this briefly here. One thing, if you've watched the videos from Nintendo that they really pushed in, well, two things I feel like they really pushed, but the first one would be this ability to have like the mysterious C button that we have seen for months and months and months, which apparently, I guess for lack of anything shorter, just stands for chat because it seems like seems like you
yeah.
press it and then this little screen comes up where you're given some options to share screen or have video with people or
Mhm.
um, just talk to them, which we should point out the new. I don't remember. Did the old Switch actually have a built-in mic? This one does.
I don't think so. I
Okay.
think the only like Nintendo offered option was some sort of cell phone app. I want to
Ah,
say, if memory serves, I never used it, but I think if you're going to do that, you're just going to use Discord or Zoom or something,
yeah.
Um, but yeah, this is the first time they've offered like built-in the chat ability, as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we got a built-in mic, which also I think in that same video from the Nintendo Direct, they claimed that apparently it can filter out noise around you and only put the verbal through. I don't know how well that'll work. I don't know if that's a thing other things have, or
I'll believe that when I see it, in all
not sure
honesty.
about that.
Yeah.
Another add-on we saw very heavily is the camera. I don't know if that has a name or not. It's basically a webcam on a stand.
A $50
Um,
webcam on the stand.
$50 webcam on a stand, which is seemed mostly, thank God, at this moment at least, to be like a way to like see your friends and interact with them a little bit more so than, but we did see a little bit of like Mario Party where that might feature you a little bit with that and other things of that type.
Did
Um,
they learn nothing from the Microsoft Connect? Nobody wanted that thing. They
that's
don't want it
true.
now.
It's true.
Uh,
Yeah, that is. I don't know. It is weird. Console players don't seem to love those, but PC it's used in some things, right?
a little. It's more. It's less camera and more. I guess sound. Like there are certain games that'll react if you make noise. And of course
Oh,
there's like chatting with
yeah.
people you're playing with and stuff. But I can't think of many that really use a camera to do stuff.
Hmm.
There's like one I can think of. It's Before Your Eyes or something like that, where every time you blink, time jumps forward. That's like the only one I can think of.
Wow, I never
Uh,
heard of that one.
yeah, it's I'll look up the exact title while we're talking here, but I think it's called Before Your Eyes.
It's
Um,
called Look Outside.
or don't. But yeah, Before Your Eyes, and it's a neat utilization of that. But I can't think of, off the top of my head, at least, any other game that really uses a camera to that extent. So
Interesting.
yeah.
When are we going to get the Fatal Frame game with the add-on camera obscura that you can actually
See
take
that
photos with?
that I could see, you pick up your Switch and use that as a camera for something like that. I could see that being a great utilization of that sort of
Right?
thing. But yeah,
Uh, this guy's got the Resident Evil 4 chainsaw controller. You know you do.
I might have it buried somewhere in my closet.
All
Oh,
right. Yeah, the other huge thing, at least, has definitely been how these new Joy-Cons, which PS we should mention are magnetic and sound better than the old ones when you'd slide them in and have that little tiny frickin' button in the back that you had a hard time pressing to try to slide them back out, or God forbid somebody would slide them in upside down, which happened in my house a few times as
mm.
well.
Oh,
Anyway. There's a button you can click, and these are all magnetic now. Actually, I don't know if it literally does it literally make the snapping sound. I don't actually know if that's
I
fake or not, but
I think there was like a little a tiny footnote in one part of the video for the direct where it said sound simulated or something like that. So
nice.
yeah.
I do know. I think it was IGN. They said they at one point like just sat and pressed the button and unattached them and reattached them for like 5 minutes because it was so satisfying to do. I guess they said they were doing it because they were concerned like the magnets would
Hmm.
wear down over time or something. But they said a lot of people were worried about like if they got bumped or knocked, like would they unmagnet, they
Oh,
knock
sure.
them off. But apparently they said they're really good, like they're locked in there. So.
Okay.
But anyway, yes, to the Joy-Cons then. So the other thing that obviously is featured a lot in these early videos is the mouse ability on the Joy-Con. I had heard this was going to be a thing. I don't think I realized how much they were investing into this thing with basically you take the Joy-Con and you set it down and then you can use it as kind of an awkwardly shaped mouse, I guess.
I did try to get a feel for what that would be like with like my phone and with the current Joy-Cons to see if it felt at all intuitive.
Oh.
It's I don't know. I would have to feel one of the new ones to see how it feels, but it just seems like it would be awkward, like you said.
Yeah. I did see so a couple things on this. I did see there is another accessory they're selling called the strap. I think it's just called the Joy-Con strap, which kind of reminded me of the old Wiimote things. And I was like, oh, that's dumb. Why would I need one of those? But apparently at the end of the strap, it actually has like feet that go on the Joy-Con to make it like more like a mouse. So
Oh,
if you're playing it that way, you can just and
huh.
I know at least IGN and I think CNET both, which I didn't realize this. This is pretty cool. I think like if you're playing, like they said they'd play Metroid in the analog way, and then when they get to like a boss fight where like precision aiming was extremely important to them, you can just spin it and put it down, and it instantly switches to mouse mode. It's not
Oh,
like a menu you go into or anything.
okay.
So that sounded pretty seamless. I thought that was pretty cool, at least. I'm still not totally sold on the mouse thing at all, but the fact that it's at least seamless sounds good. So,
Yeah. Well, in defense of the mouse controls, if they do manage to do that right and do it so it doesn't feel just completely terrible to use, this would, I think, make the Switch 2 the first home console that actually is built to play things like first-person shooters. Because analog controls aiming for like an FPS game are notoriously just bad. They usually
mm,
have built-in aim assists because trying to be precise at all is just it's a losing battle in console-based FPS games. So if they actually do manage to have it responsive and comfortable to use, that's a big selling point because first-person shooters on consoles have always been lacking compared to their PC counterparts. I could also see it useful for adventure games. Going back to like Rise of the Golden Idol, actually being able to like use a mouse like I was on my PC version,
yeah,
and click
that's
stuff.
a good point.
Yeah. So yeah,
I
certain
didn't,
genres could really benefit if they do that well.
I didn't think about that one. I mean, literally just played it. Yeah, that would
Yeah.
be. Yes, I don't know. So I guess the strap adds a little something like little mice feet or something. I guess somebody said they had to look up what they were called because they didn't know, but I don't know what they mean, like the little like pads at the bottom or something.
I
Maybe I'm
guess.
not
Yeah.
sure.
Weird.
Yeah, so yeah, I think the IGN guys are saying they were playing Metroid the analog way, basically, like through the stages, run and gun type stuff. But then when they got to like the bosses that had like, zones they had to try to hit specifically, then they would just like put it down and keep going with the mouse mode and go from there. So maybe it'll be pretty good. So that's one idea of how they would use it. And then we could talk about games in just a little bit more here yet. But the other use they showed, and that was a game called Drag Drive, I'm guessing that's pronounced, which is the like,
Oh, that.
I'm going
Yeah.
to call it wheelchair basketball because that's what it looked like was
Yeah.
wheelchair basketball.
Mhm.
And they said they played that for quite a while too. And like, with the haptic feedback, like they said, you really felt like you were actually like pushing wheels as you were going through on them. And then each Joy-Con was a different wheel, obviously, and you had to turn and learn to spin and pass and everything else. And they said they got genuinely very tired playing the game.
Huh.
So,
Not as tired as the actual wheelchair basketball athletes, I'm sure,
yeah,
but yeah.
insensitive bastards. What are you saying? Goodness
uh,
gracious.
but
Um,
before we move on though, I feel we do need to go back to the C button and all that
oh
for
yeah,
a
go
bit.
ahead.
So a couple of things. I don't know if it was, well, regardless if it was just the demo footage they used or what, when they showed the little screens at the bottom with all your friends connected and whatnot, the frame rates were absolutely atrocious. It
Yeah,
was
that
like
did not look
10,
good.
yeah, and you'd think they'd want to put forward the best footage they had of that. And if that's the best they could come up with, ooh, and that's regardless of whether it had the camera functionality on or if it was just sharing their screen. It was just like it was like a slideshow at the bottom of what you were doing. So that definitely does not have me sold on that. Especially because you can't just voice chat with your friends without paying for the online service.
Mm,
So if you're not paying them, and granted, like right now at least, that's only like $20 a year or more for the extended one. But
yeah.
if you're not shelling out for that, this highly vaunted C button that they were teasing for months, it does nothing. It's a button that does nothing. It's a button you have to pay to use. So that really doesn't sit well with me. It's like imagine if you had to like be subscribed to their online thing to take screenshots or something. It's just it feels
Hmm.
very uh money grubby.
I don't
And
think I
that's
had thought
just
about the interaction between using it and you have to have the online service then you're saying,
yeah. I mean it's
which makes
free to do the
sense.
voice chat until like March of next year or something. But
Okay.
after that you've got to pay. You have to shell out to use a button on a controller. But, what? No.
Do you know
That's
is that like is the tier that we have, does that cover it or do you if they said that or not?
Uh, I I think they said it's as long as you're part of the online subscription,
Okay.
regardless of which one you have. I think it's included, but I don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure,
Okay.
so I can yeah try to dig that up in the background here.
Okay. Yeah, so the mouse, back to that briefly here, they said it ran really well on flat surfaces, tables. Apparently people were concerned early on, and I guess rightfully so, with like, do we have to stand up to like use the mouse that way
Mm.
or whatever? I don't know how it's work exactly, but several websites I saw tested it on their jeans, and apparently when they were there for the preview events, the Nintendo people were like, "No, just do it on your jeans, on your pant leg," and they said it worked really well. I don't know what that means, but
Huh.
there's that. One website also claimed it even worked well on people's hair, but I don't know exactly if that's a measurable thing. So, other,
And
uh,
apparently, game chat is included with any online membership for the Switch. So
okay,
yeah,
all right. Other things here, just briefly, changes. The kickstand is slightly different on this one. It's more of like I want to say like a C shape, I guess, or U shape, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it.
it's like a rounded part of a rectangle, kind of like with the
Yeah.
edges sort of beveled. Yeah.
This was one thing IGN said they did not prefer compared to, at least on the OLED, they have a really nice, like a whole panel that comes back and like that's the kickstand. Like so they actually went flimsier with this new one.
Huh.
Probably way still better than the original Switch, which had that one little tabby thing that comes on the back. But my question with this is like, it's nice that it's there, but like, do people really play this way? This is like the third mode, basically, right? And
Yeah, I don't think I've
yeah,
ever used my Switch that way.
the idea that like you have, I guess you could still play single player, but in my head I'm like, let's set it up because there's three people I found at like this park that want to play Smash Brothers magically or something like. I don't know.
I
I
don't
tried to
know.
use it on a plane a couple times, but the angle with like the plane seat and the table
Mm.
just
Oh,
didn't
geez, yeah.
didn't work. But we should point out this new one does actually have a couple different angles you can put the screen at. So
Mhm.
I think that one actually would have worked pretty well. I wonder if that is actually made for planes. I didn't think about that. Because there's
Possibly.
one that's like just a little up, like 30-degree angle or
Hmm.
something. That would have been about perfect. But
Huh.
other things here, they improved. I'm going to call it improved. The SL and SR buttons, which if you're thinking what the hell are those are the two tiny niblets on the top of the Joy-Cons when you take them off separately. And they were ridiculously small on the old Switch, Switch 1. And apparently are larger buttons that you can actually like click and press now, which is fantastic improvement. The big question, I guess, is Nintendo is still not saying whether or not they have switched the joystick type to the Hall effect joysticks, which everything I read says that's basically where we need to be at this point in time.
Mhm.
Which, this is interesting because I've heard so much about joystick drift, and I've heard it's like, it was a huge problem for Nintendo with this system. I've heard it affects the other systems as well, but not as much. Is that true?
I I have one PS4 controller that I bought secondhand, secondhand that ended up developing a bit of drift.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I don't think I've seen it on any other system.
Okay.
Like I have PS3 controllers that I'm sure I could hook up right now and load up a game and they'd work just fine.
Yeah.
So
I thought early in the Switch's life, like when Joy-Con drift started to really become a thing that people focused on and was kind of like a public problem, not just like, oh, it must be a me thing, and when people realized that they had said there was something about like how the Joy-Cons were designed specifically with the joystick that basically led them to that problem. And if they had designed the controller differently, they wouldn't have had the problem. But now it sounds as though they're basically saying like it doesn't matter how they built it, it would have been a problem unless they go with this other method, which I read a little bit about, but don't fully go into all the details here. Something about like how much space it has here and there, and chance for stuff to get in this space, blah blah blah.
mhm. Yeah, I glanced at an article about that too, and it's just like I kind of get this, but I don't know all the technical stuff. I don't have a firm grasp of it, so we'll have to wait and see which type they actually use, I guess.
Yeah, I was talking to my son about this right before we came up, and was kind of explaining a little bit of like what that meant as far as I knew, and like the fact that they're not immediately coming out and saying we fixed it and have this other method makes me a little bit worried. But then I also at least want to think back to like earlier when they said like there was a different way they could have built the internal components that wouldn't have caused the problem. So I don't know. I don't know where that'll be, but
Yeah,
hopefully we find that out sometime soon.
yeah, because I mean, I think that might also be something other people are waiting to see before they take the plunge because those
Yeah.
things aren't cheap, and I mean even for the regular Switch, I think they're like 80-90 bucks or something for the Switch 2. So
Yes.
yeah, that's a big gamble if they're still using the same sort of hardware that might start drifting after a couple of months. So I could see that causing people to wait before pulling the trigger too.
Yeah.
So
All right, last thing I have before we jump into games, unless you have anything else here, is a couple of the websites that are out there have had the chance to also use the Pro Controller 2, the new version of that, which they said feels just about exactly the same in your hand as the old one did, which I actually really liked the old one, so I hope that it's
yeah.
true. The only thing really different on this is it has, guess you guessed it, a C button, but also has a GL and a GR button. So the G button has entered the Nintendo dictionary or alphabet, I guess, at this point, which are basically the like inside programmable buttons that other controllers have had for a long time prior to this. So
Which is kind of cool. But I guess if we're ready to head into like the software, I know the perfect lead-in.
go
You're
for it,
probably
man.
gonna hate me for it. Okay.
Can we
So
put the
if
whole Konami code on one of those buttons? This feels like
Oh
cheating.
man.
All right.
But yeah, so if you wanted to know more about the hardware of the Switch that we haven't covered here, well, good news. Nintendo has a sort of virtual walkthrough of the guts of the Switch that where you can learn about how the magnets work and the how the gyroscopic motion of the various components work. If you pay them money, I was watching the live stream of this, and they were going through this, and like just how it's like a literal walkthrough of it, and it's like, oh, that's kind of neat. And then he's like, in this paid tech demo or whatever, and the chat just exploded. They lost their damn minds, and rightfully so, because there's no reason in hell for this to cost money. They could just have it as a video to like guide people through the various features. But no, they're trying to make people pay money for something that's not even a game that you'll play through maybe once and then forget about and regret the fact that you spent money on it. Even if it's like $5, that's too much because it should be free. It's I yeah, I still am a little bit at a loss for words for this almost a week later because the sheer hubris of them to expect people to shell out money to learn about the system that they have in their hands, it boggles the mind.
My comment on this one is number one, it should be free. I feel like it should have been like pre-downloaded on all of the copies of the system when you buy it. So you turn it on and there it is. So it definitely should be free. And number two, I don't even aside from the like some people like probably thinking this is like a money grab, but like I don't know that I've ever seen a tutorial you have to pay to try to learn to
Yes,
do something. I'm like, how does that
right.
work? No one's
Like,
gonna do that.
no. Like I haven't really used it since I got glasses that don't fit under it, but when my Oculus Quest 2, it came with a little pack-in thing where it's like, hey, this is all the stuff you can do in VR. You can like throw darts and like shoot at targets. You can dance with a robot. You know what I had to pay for this? Nothing. And it was a really nice, quirky, sweet introduction to everything that technology had to offer. And that's what these sorts of things should be. I agree with you. I'm glad you agree with me that it should not cost money because that is absolutely insane.
I don't think it should cost money. I will say from a few of the websites again that have had a chance to play through that, it is apparently a pretty extensive collection of mini games
Hmm.
that are in there. So I get what they're coming from and they're thinking maybe that way, but even if so, like I was reminded of when the Wii came out, and apparently Nintendo did not want to include Wii Sports with the Wii, and what was his name? Reggie Alm Films or whatever his name was back in
Hmm.
the day, Reggie.
Reggie Fils-Aimé or however you
Yeah.
pronounce that. Yeah.
He apparently fought with them for a long time and finally won and was like, no, we need to include this with the system to like show what it does. And I mean, obviously that was brilliant because people still talk about, Wii bowling and stuff to
Yeah.
today. So I don't think that this game's going to have the staying power of that game, but
Yeah. Reggie,
I
come
don't.
back.
Yeah, I don't get this one. Well, let's talk about first party games since you're already there.
Sure.
This is no real difference. The cartridges are back like they were from the old system. Difference being they're now red instead of, I guess they were, what were they, black before? I
Black.
guess they were black,
Generally. Yeah.
which is a little weird to me only because they like muted the system down to like this nice matte black and then they're like, you know what color we need for the cartridges? Red, which
Well, they couldn't have gone neon green because that's sort of the Xbox thing. Blue is Sony's thing, so I guess they had to go with red if they're going to
I
go with
get, yeah,
anything.
I guess if they're gonna make it so it's looks different than the original Switch games, then I guess they had to pick a different color, but
Yeah,
it's just kind of weird.
it is. I
But
agree. It is.
that struck me as a little weird. All right, well, let's get into these. We have the question of do we have enough games here essentially maybe to have people think about whether they want to purchase this or not. Games are going to drive a lot of the sales for this. And the first one they come out of the gate with in their highlight reel is probably the smartest one, right? I would have to think,
Yep.
which is Mario Kart. It's the new iteration of Mario Kart. This is probably going to be their system seller for quite a while, particularly if they can get the online mode good and it's got good local co-op and all these things. Um, Mario Kart 8, which I was curious, I looked up. This is the one that started on the Wii U and then was ported over to the Switch, has sold 75 million copies, which is officially the fifth highest of all time for any game. And
Wow.
that does include in the four above it Minecraft, which I feel is kind of a bit of a freebie to go into the number one spot. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so ridiculous. None of the other Mario Karts we should really say here. Like maybe Mario Kart Wii But like Mario Kart was always a big franchise, but it was never like that big of a franchise as that number,
Right.
which is pretty crazy. So what we've seen at least from this, as they showed in the video, we have three basic modes. We have your Grand Prix back like we've always had in Mario Kart. There is a knockout mode wherein you are racing multiple races in a row, but have to continually ascend up like the place you finish by the end of the race, or you're knocked out, and that's the end. And then I don't know if this has a title or not, but basically open world Mario Kart? Question
That
mark?
blew my mind.
What the hell?
Yeah, I will say this is probably the strongest way they could have possibly opened the showcase. Like watching just this feature on the new Mario Kart, it was joyful. There's no other way for it. It was bright. It was colorful. It offered new things. It expanded what you can do in terms of like just not just the number of racers, but like you said, open world stuff. That's incredible. And even like on the tracks, there's a section where you're doing like freaking Ninja Gaiden wall jumps
Yeah.
across a span, and I'm like, holy crap, this looks incredible. I do kind of wish the entire presentation had kept up that level of just beauty because it would have. I mean, I probably would have been looking to pre-order one of these, but we'll get there. But yeah, I loved how they started this off. Mario Kart, what was it, World Tour or whatever they're
I
calling it?
think
It
it's just
looks
Mario Kart World they're calling it.
oh, okay. It looks amazing. Just unconditionally amazing.
Yeah, I agree. I don't even fully comprehend, like, is there gonna be stuff to do out in the open world? Is it just a chance for you to like drive around with your friends in the open world? Can I locally play multiplayers in the open world, or does it have to be online? Like, I have a lot of questions here.
Yeah.
Um, but it was also weird to like watch some of the videos out there and just see like somebody driving down this trail, and then I was watching something with Boston earlier again, and like in the middle of this trail, this guy been out for like a minute. Like there was a power up question mark that was out there, and I was like, wait, what? You can get like power ups out here in the open world too?
Huh.
So I don't even know what that is about. But the other big news on this one is we have doubled the amount of racers on a track from 12 to 24. So if you ever thought playing Mario Kart, this is chaotic, I have a feeling you haven't seen anything yet. This is another one, Mario Kart, every generation of this they've had come out too, you're always like, well, what could they do to add to this series? Like, doesn't seem like they can come up with more. And then when they revealed this one, I was like, holy God, like this is
Yeah, that is
like
just peak creativity. Yeah, I applaud them for thinking very much outside the box and outside the track in terms of like the open world stuff. Um, yeah, just
yeah, it's just
I
it looks cool.
it does. Yeah. I mean,
Um, Go ahead.
I mean, yeah, this I figured if you and I were going to agree on anything in this, it would be on this game.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just because I don't see anyone that this wouldn't appeal to. And that's about the highest praise I can give it.
Which, again, why not make it your system seller, right? Like, who's not
Yeah,
gonna like Mario Kart?
yeah.
My wife, of all people, who does not video game much these days, was excited because she was like, "Well, can I just like drive on the race courses also?" And I was like, "Presumably, I don't know." And she was excited because she's like, "Oh, great, then I can like find out where like the actual shortcuts are and like how to be good at the races without the panic and pressure of the races." And I
Oh,
was like,
that's
"Yeah,
smart.
I guess so."
Yeah,
Never would have thought of that, but yeah.
cool.
All right. So that's what we're going to lead with. Let's do a couple other ones in here. We mentioned drag drive, which I'm just calling wheelchair basketball. Don't mean that to be offensive, but just this is again with the two Joy-Cons used as mice, and sounds like Rocket League was the closest somebody made a comparison to, I think I saw
Hmm,
online, which was like just chaotic back and forth. And
I could kind of see it,
I don't know.
but at a slower pace, it seems like.
Yeah.
So, interesting from
Only
showing off
slower
what.
pace if you're not going fast enough, Justin.
There you go. Yeah, it interesting to show off the technology, but I don't see that one having much staying power, in all honesty.
Yeah.
Um, It could be fun to break out every once in a while, but yeah, it's I can't imagine anyone seeing that and being like, I'm buying a Switch 2 for that, you know?
Yeah, that's actually how I feel about Rocket League, but I know some people get way into it, so
Never played it, but I hear it's fun. So
it is fun for like 20 minutes. And then you're like, I'll come back in another year. We have a copy of it somewhere, I'm pretty sure. But let's talk about, was this the closer? Donkey Kong Bonanza? Now, technically not a launch because it comes out the following month. A
mhm,
lot of speculation that like Nintendo's only doing that to create like a, progressive a rollout of their games.
mhm,
It probably could be a launch on day one, but just to give people a chance to play Mario Kart and then drag it out a little bit.
mhm.
They fooled me. I'll be honest, man. I'm sure I'm not the only one. They had this beautiful world. You could tell it was a 3D platformer, these bright characters and sprites and colors, and then they get like what was it, like a silhouette or something, and
Hmm.
fucking Donkey Kong walks out, and I was like, "What?"
Hmm. I was not expecting that either. And yeah, I've never really been the biggest fan of Donkey Kong. I mean, he's there. I've played a few of the games, but he's never really been like my go-to character. Is like, oh man, there's a new Donkey Kong game coming out or whatever. This one actually looks intriguing. Like it's Donkey Kong meets Red Faction, where you can just like bust your way through the environment and just like kind of carve your own path through walls and through the ground, and yet it's bright and colorful, and the enemies look like they have a lot of personality to them, and it's I'm actually kind of curious about this one, which I wasn't expecting as soon as because as soon as it was like, oh, it's Donkey Kong, I kind of just mentally tuned out. But then I watched what was unfolding in front of me, and I'm like, that actually looks fun. So kudos to them for taking a character I didn't really care about and doing something good with them.
Yeah, and
So
this is another good example of, what they probably should do more, even with a character that we know and is established, like throw them in a new environment, new type of game, and just make
yeah,
something new out of it. Is it enough that you would call it like a new IP? I don't know. It's
yeah,
questionable, I guess, but it does look like a lot of fun. I really thought this was going to be Super Mario Odyssey 2 when they started the trailer, and kudos to them. Like they threw me off on that, and I went from being very confident to being very surprised to being a little disappointed to being very intrigued in like a 2 minute span.
yeah. Very mixed reactions from me too, but I ended up in the same point. I am quite intrigued on this one, and it looks like I mean, it could just be a blast to play.
Yeah. Some people have got their hands on this one and have played it as well. Comments from a couple websites again on this said it seems to be big on humor and gameplay, and the series most compared it to was like the style of Ratchet and Clank. So,
I
and
could
I
see it.
haven't played those, so there you go.
I could see that actually. And yeah, I mean, that sort of bright, lively style is what Nintendo has always been good at. So them leaning into that with both Mario Kart and this, yeah, they are really leaning on their strengths in terms of the first party stuff, it seems like.
Yeah.
Um, even Metroid Prime 4, or whatever they're actually calling it.
The next game we're going to talk about, so hit it, Justin.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a darker tone, of course, but it is still colorful. I mean, the new world that Samus finds herself on, it's bright. It really, it's not quite psychedelic, but I mean, it is very much a visual feast.
Yeah.
And I'm fully behind that. And yeah, the idea of giving her psychic powers, to add a different layer to the gameplay from what we've seen in previous Metroid games is really neat, I think. And yeah, it looks solid. It looks very solid. So I really can't fault Nintendo for the first party stuff they've had on display. Um, it's just and bringing back like the scanning and using it to figure out stuff on in your environment. I would kind of wish they'd done more of that in the first couple of games, because I remember like towards the beginning of Metroid Prime 1,
Yep.
where you're just like going through the facility with the space pirates. The one that always sticks in my mind is there's one that's kind of like stumbling around, and if you scan him, it's like uh you know contusion, like a concussion detected, may behave erratically or something like that, and I'm like, that is just really
Hmm.
interesting world building because it's yeah, you can see this enemy and like infer it from what you're seeing, but also having it spelled like spelled out for you in the game's in-game lore, it's
Yeah.
like okay, that's a level of depth that they really kind of could have stood to do more with. And sure, you could scan the bosses and be like, okay, its weak point is this and whatnot. But just that environmental storytelling was really neat, and I do hope that we see that implemented a lot more in the new Metroid Prime. So
Yeah, this was the one I was most excited for to come out on the Switch. I didn't know if it would get bumped to Switch 2. Um, this one, I was thinking about this one too, just in terms of I put it on the our most anticipated when we did the list. I put it mine somewhere near the top of that, but thinking about like the cost of the games, which we'll get to later on here, but just this is one I mentioned, like was basically done right in like 2021, I think, and then Nintendo was like not up to our quality, and they scrapped it and they started the whole
yep,
games fresh, right?
yeah,
I'm thinking like, can they, theoretically, would they even make money on this? I mean, like they've already paid for the game to be made twice, so
that's a very good point.
I
Uh,
don't know. I mean, I hope it sells because Metroid to me has always been like a non-appreciated franchise from Nintendo. Like enough
yeah,
people, more people should like it than do.
agreed. Especially considering it has like an entire genre named after itself right now. Well, that and
Yeah,
Castlevania with the Metroidvania crossover. Yeah, it's always been like one of my favorites too of the Nintendo branches of franchises. And for whatever reason, yeah, they never focus on it as much as the Zeldas, the Marios, even Donkey Kong sometimes. And I don't get it. So hopefully this will give it a chance to breathe, to spread its wings. I know we had Metroid Dread a few years
yeah.
back, and that one was kind of fun. But yeah, it would be nice to see this really just kind of take off and succeed on it. It's a bigger thing.
This could
So
be like they could really, if they're not going to create a new franchise in this particular idea, they could use Metroid to really go dark if they wanted to. I mean, they
yeah,
could throw Samus on a planet. You start every game basically with losing all your weapons anyway.
hmm,
So give her like the basic blaster cannon and put her on a planet that has like people that are infected, and like you could make this dark as shit if you wanted to.
yeah,
And why not? Like use this as your sci-fi game and make it dark.
yeah. I could be on board with that definitely. I
Seems
mean,
like
and yeah, you were mentioning them branching out with new ideas anyway, and it seems like they've started to do that. So yeah, I would be totally on board with them taking just a dark, almost horror-ish take to Metroid. That would be really interesting, I think.
agreed. Be fun.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I do want to talk some more about some first party stuff, but I want to come back to it when we look at backwards compatibility and some of the old titles that are going to be upgraded here for the new Switch 2. But let's go to some of the third party launch titles. Curious to hear from you. Is there anything in here that you liked or disliked from the ones that you've seen so far?
Um, well, a lot of it was please be excited to play this game on a Nintendo platform that's already been available on everything else for years.
Yep.
But of the new releases, I had to go and track one of them down because the stream froze when they actually were trying to announce it.
Oh,
And Enter the Gungeon 2. The first game
okay.
was fantastic. Roguelike shooter, like bullet hell kind of a thing. Great game, endlessly replayable. I'm quite excited for the sequel, so that one is definitely on my radar as something to look at. Um, the big one, of course, I'll just get this out of the way, is the not Bloodborne 2, except not game from Software that is entirely a Switch 2 exclusive, Dusk Bloods, which initially looked like it was going to just be a spiritual successor to Bloodborne, and then details came out where it's like a player versus enemy 8-person multiplayer thing, and I don't know if I'm on board with that. Because if this had been just a straight up Bloodborne style Souls-like, I would have, yeah, it would have been a system seller for me. But with this, an entire focus on multiplayer is not something I know that I can say I'm on board with necessarily from a FromSoft game. However, I do think it hints at something we haven't really mentioned with all this focus on like voice chat and video chat, and then an entirely multiplayer focused game. It implies without specifically stating that Nintendo will finally actually start having its own servers for things. Because
Oh, okay.
if you remember from the Switch, like when we tried to play Smash Brothers together in the past, it was choppy and laggy because Nintendo doesn't have its own servers. It was all relying on the person hosting the game, their internet connection to host things like it's still 1997. And
Hmm.
if they're going to be diving into more of a multiplayer focus, it hopefully implies that they're actually investing in multiplayer architecture. Because if they're not, this is going to be just a shit show. Because games that are more complex require more bandwidth, require more synchronicity, and if there's not a backbone to support that, it's gonna get ugly. So hopefully, it implies that they're actually putting that support in. I don't know for sure. We'll have to wait and see, but I hope they are. Um, Trying to think of like other notable third party stuff that was announced that doesn't already exist. Were there any on your list? Because I'm kind of drawing a
Well,
blank
I'll just run
thinking
through
about
a
those
few
two.
that they announced here. I don't know, I
Sure.
like Elden Ring, Madden, Cyberpunk 2077. Early reports are that it does not play that well on console mode, even unfortunately. But
Hmm.
again, maybe something will be fixed between now and then.
Hopefully.
Split Fiction, I'm not as familiar with that game, but they said there were some issues with that one as well.
Hmm.
Hogwarts Legacy, they said looked pretty good on the system. Street Fighter 6, a couple of websites said actually made them feel like the new Switch could be a real alternative to like modern systems.
Okay.
So that was good. Civ 7, I will say, just because I don't play a lot of games on PC, that's a game I'd be interested in, especially, I guess, with the mouse feature, which I didn't
Oh,
really,
sure.
I guess that was maybe the one I did think about it, but
Okay.
I was intrigued, I will say, as a Nintendo only player, that they are having, if I understand this correct, a remastered version of the Yakuza series and also a Hitman game, but the Hitman game seemed to be not one of the main games. It was like missions from some of the games here and there.
Yeah, it's kind of what it sounded like. I've never really gotten into that series, but it did sound like it was sort of a mishmash of the like almost a greatest hits kind of a thing of
Yeah,
Hitman. Yeah,
which
greatest Hitman.
depending on how much is there, I've never played any of it. So if they were like, here's the, 12 best missions, and I'd be like, okay, maybe this would be. I know Dave loves it. It's one of his favorite series.
Yeah.
Um, there's a game called Survival Kids, which looked like probably geared for people younger than myself, but I will say looked fun. It was like multiplayer local co-op on an island, like trying to solve problems and to like overcome obstacles, which kind of gave me like vibes of almost like a multiplayer Pikmin almost, like a little sandbox environment that you're around in trying to figure out how to get around something, do something, but by building things. And then yeah, my interest was piqued. Though thinking about it now, I don't really know why, because I only really enjoyed precisely one game in the series. But they teased the new 007 game coming to the Nintendo Switch,
Hmm.
and obviously the music and the movies and everything. But really, I guess I only liked GoldenEye. Let's be honest. But
Okay.
I did play a couple other ones, but they were nowhere near as fun. I didn't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Did you think of any more?
Uh, no, I mean, hearing you talk about a few of them is like, oh yeah, I remember when that one was on screen and whatnot. But so many of them were just, it's like this is already out there. It's probably going to cost more than the currently available versions on other systems, especially if the
Right.
game's a few years old and the price has fallen a bit. So for me, I did really kind of tune a lot of the third party stuff out as soon as it was like, okay, that exists already. That exists already. This is new. That exists already. That exists. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, for me, the third party lineup is not really gonna be selling systems, at least initially. Enter the Gungeon 2 aside, and maybe whatever how well Dusk Bloods doesn't even come out until 2026. So I mean
Hmm.
that's gonna be a ways out yet. But yeah, the others it's just kind of like pay more for something that's you could get for, something else that probably runs just as well. So yeah, the third party stuff is a bit of a flat note so far.
And what did you think of the announcement of Silk Song being Nintendo exclusive?
I A, it wasn't announced as an exclusive, but B,
We lost you, Justin. What was that?
but yeah, I remember I posted something on Facebook about like the lackluster like third party support, and someone was like, "Well, what about the Silk Song announcement?" And I'm like, they literally just said 2025. And they said it was coming out in, I believe, 2023 at one point. So
Yeah.
that means literally nothing.
Yeah. I think I saw
So,
somebody else point that out as well. They're like, it was on a Microsoft sizzle reel like 4 years ago or something like
right.
something crazy like that.
If they had given an actual release date, I would have lost my mind. But instead, it's just maybe this year sometime, possibly,
It's
probably.
funny.
Yeah.
They're still trying to
So,
integrate all of the voice chat and camera work into it for playing with your friends. And
but everything you say is just going to sound like,
well,
or
yeah, but boy, spoil it. Jeez. All right, well, let's go into the last section on games here. I guess because I'm curious your thoughts on this, slash looking towards you to possibly have an answer or two. I don't know why I think you would, but let's talk about games that already exist
Mhm,
on Nintendo systems, but are either being re-released or being upscaled to the new system, as well as we should point out that the Switch 2 does have backwards compatibility, because I don't think I've actually said that for
mhm,
almost every game.
mhm.
Sounds like are probably some that have like unique circumstances that probably will not translate, but the vast majority of these are going to be playable, right away, day one. So,
Yeah. Okay, I'll tackle the last of those first. Backwards compatibility, great thing. Assuming that there aren't any hiccups or like compatibility issues with trying to actually get them to run. That's great. It means GameStop is going to be flooded with Switch ones potentially, which is going to suck for them. But yeah, if your current catalog does work almost in its entirety on the Switch 2, then that's great. There's no downsides to that, assuming it goes off without a hitch. The others are a bit more contentious for me. Going back again to like the difference between the Switch 1 and Switch 2 versions of like the Zeldas that they had the side by side comparisons on. It's not a sizable upgrade, as far as I can tell. If there's better performance on some of those, then sure that could count for something, and that's a little harder to get across in like a sizzle reel. But expecting okay, the fact that Breath of the Wild is still $60 for like the base version of the game on the Switch One is downright criminal. And because that game, it was a launch title. It is 8 years old at this point. That's insane. And for the upgraded version, if you want to buy like the straight up Switch 2 version of say Breath of the Wild, I think they're saying it's at least 80, or from what I remember, it was 70 or 80 for a game that's 8 years old. That's lunacy. For it to just look a little bit better, that is absolute insanity. Um, and if you were paying like, I think there is an option, like you said, to pay for the upgraded version of something you already own to the Switch 2 version. I know that's less, so that's a bit more reasonable. But expecting like just remastering the version, selling it as a Switch 2 version, and saying, "Give us $80, please," that does not sit well with me. That is straight up Sony bullshit territory right here, where they are like, like I just so in the interest of fairness, yeah, I'll go off on Sony too because I hate what they've done. They've squandered this current console generation with endless remakes and remasters of games that people already have. Um, Fucking Horizon Zero Dawn is not that old of a game. They've remastered it. How many remasters of The Last of Us have we had? Fuck if I know. Too many. I really half expected them during the going back to Nintendo for a second. I have expected them to say, "And Skyrim is coming to the Switch too," just because so much of this is already crap that's out there. But yeah, I am so done with the remakes and remasters of most things. Aside from games that are like 20, 30 years old, that those get a bit of a pass because sure, they
yeah.
could use the polish. But stuff that's like 5 years old, 3 years old, there's no reason in hell why why development teams should be pouring months, if not years worth of money and resources and time into just making slightly shinier versions of them. It's insane. It is killing AAA gaming, and it just make new things. Fucking make new things. So that's my rant at Sony. Nintendo, I am not. I don't want them to go to lean too heavily on this because sure, some games could stand to run a lot better from the Switch to the Switch 2. Those deserve an upgrade. But expecting people to pay $80 just to get a game to run smoothly when they already own a copy of it is assuming there's not like an upgrade price for the particular game in question.
Yeah.
That really does not sit well with me.
All right.
And
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No,
all I was going to say is, and that kind of leads into like the whole pricing thing, which I know is a little further down the
yeah, that's the next thing we'll get into here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how about we let Justin catch his breath? That was a good rant. And I will attempt to make some sense out of what we know so far, which the system's not even out yet for 2 months, so we don't know a lot. But Nintendo has this kind of breakdown what Justin's saying here. If you own a game, the Switch 1 version of that game, such as a Breath of the Wild, for example, that is a version of the game. There are supposed to be Switch 2 versions of a lot of these games that you could purchase at the new price, as Justin points out, which would essentially give you the premium experience of whatever that game would be. And I would have to think that would be targeted at people who have never played the game before. Who would have not played Zelda Breath of the Wild at this point? I don't know because it's been around forever. And I will counter your point slightly by saying I feel like Breath of the Wild has basically been $42 on Amazon for like 4 years now, but it's on sale all the time. But
okay,
all right. So Tears of the Kingdom, much more recent game, same exact situation though. So you can have a Switch 1 version, you can have a Switch 2 version. Those games that are going to be on this magic list, of which nobody knows what games will eventually be on it, but you can also upgrade the old version to the new version. I'm not even going to begin to understand technically how that works because I don't have the slightest clue, but we can upscale it somehow, I guess, with the old cartridge for a fee, which is like basically paying the difference between the old version versus the new version. Except wait, one more curveball in here. There will also be titles such as Mario Party Jamboree, which when you get the upgraded version will also include new games that use the mouse and the video play and the voice commands and other things of this nature. But wait, there's also back to the Zelda games. If you have a subscription to the Nintendo Online Expansion Pass, those games are upgraded for free for you as part of your expansion pass. So you do get the newest version of the Zelda games, but that's certainly not going to be every game. I assume that's because they're like Nintendo's two big Zelda games, you know. But we don't know which games are going to even be up for this. Is it going to be only first party games? Are a third party company is going to try to take advantage of this as well? I don't know.
They might if it starts making money for the first party ones, maybe. But it's a lot of this is really complicated, and I think
Yes.
it's going to be more complicated than most people are going to want to deal with. At least in terms of like exploring their options to the fullest. Which Nintendo might be banking on. They might be banking on people saying, well, I don't know, like, I don't want to have to consult the list to see if there's a way to upgrade this or if it comes with extra features. I'm just going to buy the new one. That might be what they're banking on. And that also doesn't quite sit well with me. One other thing I want to backtrack a tiny bit on,
Yep.
because we haven't touched on it, and I just remembered. So a lot of Nintendo has decided that they're going to do something people have been asking for a long time, but in kind of the worst way possible. So there's been an argument for a long time, which I approve of, that digital games should cost less than physical games because you don't have to worry about shelf space, you don't have to worry about shipping or materials or whatever. But Nintendo decided to make the digital versions cost less while raising the price of everything. So like a lot of the baseline for a lot of their physical games seems like it's going to be $80, at least for their first party stuff. Whereas the digital version is going to be, I think, 70, which is still more than like your average physical game costs now for a Nintendo console. So, uh, but wait, it gets worse. So let's say you buy the physical version. You might not be buying the physical version.
Yep.
You might be buying a cartridge with like an unlock key on the cartridge that gets you the digital version of the game, which is worse than just buying the digital version of the game because you can't play the digital version of the game after you've unlocked it with that key without having the cartridge in the slot. In what universe does this make sense? How is this consumer friendly? How is this convenient or anything other than a gigantic pain in the ass and the most cumbersome way you can go about this? I it boggles my mind that they would do. It's worse than just buying like a clamshell box and just finding a paper code in it because you don't have to put the paper code in your fucking PlayStation or your Switch or whatever. You have to, but when you're buying a console with just the key on it, you have to have the key, or a cartridge with a key on it. You have to have that cartridge in your system to play the game that you just download digitally anyways.
Oh,
It's
but you have to have the cartridge physically in there, you're saying?
I think so. If I remember correctly from
Okay.
the presentation, which is the dumbest possible way to go about things, because the game isn't even on the cartridge, so it's not saving space on the the internal storage or like
Yeah.
the SD storage. There's literally no point to this. Just ah,
To me, it feels like yet another effort by the gaming industry to push us to just all only buy digital stuff, which I have come around a lot more, I will say, in the last 4 years buying stuff digitally. That's mostly because some stuff you physically can't get anymore. But I
yeah,
still prefer physical, like the downside is we have lost probably 3 games, I would say, for the Switch because they were in a case and they were physical and the case disappeared and there goes all the games. So there they go. So that does suck. But when people ask me why I can, like, I know Dave is all digital for sure. Like he will never go back to physical. Um, but at least now, like if you buy, let's say I buy a $90 Mario Kart game and it is a truly physical game, I won't, but I could resell it for probably $50, and that's always been the advantage of the physicals to me is like they don't inherently lose all value as soon as you purchase them.
great. Yeah, like I just recently traded in a couple of games, including the mistake I made of buying another copy of Xenoblade Chronicles instead of Xenoblade Chronicles X. I traded in that and a few other things towards just getting the game I wanted in the first place. And so yeah, I picked up a few I haven't played in ages. I probably would never play again. Got the game I bought or mistakenly took all those to GameStop, traded them in, and I paid like $2 for Xenoblade Chronicles X after that, and it was just yeah, you can do that with physical stuff. And let's say
Yep.
you lose your connection to the internet. There are some. I know Nintendo said that once you download a game, you don't need to be connected to the internet to play it. And if that's true, that's great. But there are a lot of services services, systems, platforms, whatever, where if you're not connected to the internet, the digital
Yep.
games you have bought, you legitimately can't play because it can't verify the license or whatever. And yeah, that is why even though I'm a PC gamer and nothing comes out physically for PC, when I do buy console games, I try to buy them physically whenever I possibly can, just because I know I'll have at least some semblance of security knowing that I'll be able to play it if, my internet goes down or if I'm traveling or something like that.
Well, we just don't know. I mean, we've even reviewed games here on the podcast that, like, I've told you guys, like, brought this game with me to play. Guess what? Internet connection required, and everyone would be
Yeah.
like, "Why the hell would you need an internet connection for that game?"
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
little, indie game that's like 2 gigs or whatever, like super small.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it goes all, I mean, or even like a completely single player experience. There are games like that where you need to be connected to the internet because it's money, I guess, or something. I don't know.
so we'll have to,
Invasive,
yeah, we'll have to see
invasive
where this
DRM.
plays out. I just get
Mhm.
to your point. I feel like so. Let's just say like in not many stores even have a ton of physical games anymore. But let's just say I walk into like a Walmart and I go down the Nintendo aisle and they have, are they going to have Legend of Zelda Switch 1 edition, Legend of Zelda Switch 2 edition, upgrade card for if you already
Hmm,
are those going to be sold in store, or can you only upgrade on the Nintendo store, or
that's a good question.
I
Uh,
don't know the answer to that.
and if furthermore, will you have to be subscribed to their online service to buy the upgrades? I could see them trying to pull that sort of shit.
Hmm.
You have to do it to be able to talk to your friends, unless you are already using Discord like 90% of the population. But yeah, I mean, you're right. There are a lot of unanswered questions, and they pose some disturbing options for if the answer goes the wrong way. So,
I guess we should point out too, we didn't mention this anywhere in here, and I had actually kind of forgotten about it. There were a couple other features regarding games that we didn't mention. One was the ability that finally, because I felt like this should have been this way for a long time, and actually might cut into their bottom line a little bit, but they have finally implemented that if one person has the card, you could still share that game and play like a four-player Mario Kart if one person has Mario Kart.
that is cool. I think you all have to be in the same vicinity to do that,
Yeah.
which does kind of make sense. Um, which means you also have to have a bunch of people with their own Switches over at your house or whatever, which
Yeah,
why not just have them bring their Joy-Cons so you can play on the big screen? But I mean, the option to
that's true.
have, yeah, but the option to have that shareability, at least in concept, is nice. I mean, how useful it's going to be in practice is a little questionable, but I mean, I could see it having its advantages at times.
Yeah, there definitely could be. I was just thinking too of like maybe Mario Kart would only minimally be an example of this type of game, but if you were playing like a first person shooter where like you just didn't
Hmm,
want to see everybody else's screen, that could have some real
sure.
implications, or like
Yeah,
a
that's
horror killer game or something.
yeah, like if they brought Dead by Daylight onto the
Yeah,
Switch or something. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
that could be kind of cool. Then you could be sitting like 2 feet away from.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
and like taunting your friends without them seeing where you are. And yeah, yeah, I could see. Okay, yeah, you've sold me a bit more on it now.
that might be neat. And then there was something about like we watched it, but we didn't really understand it. There was also something about like transferring a virtual card to somebody in your household or something.
Yeah, it's like you could link one other Switch account. I don't know if it had to be on the same Switch too, or if it was just like you would registered it as being connected with you in some way, and then they could also play your games, but that was the only one you could share with or something.
I,
Again, this gets back to how they're making things complicated.
I wasn't clear on that one at all.
Same.
Is that like it's like if you had a game on your Switch and you just wanted to borrow it? Because didn't it have to be borrowed? I think like the kids said you only had it
Something.
borrowed for like so many weeks too, and you had to reborrow it or something.
Yeah, something like that. It's
Must
like
be
a
like a
library
temporary
system,
memory or
kind of.
something.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like I miss the days where, like the E3 presentation. This is how you share a game on the PlayStation 4 when Xbox was trying to make it so you couldn't like share games with people, and the guy just like hands the case to somebody else, and then they like do a thumbs up. I mean, I miss those days where it was simple and it made sense. Uh
Yeah. All right. Last things on this I have just I was curious. It said, with I think correct me if I'm wrong on this, but if you ran an original Switch one, I don't know how that would work. If you ran just a regular Switch 1 game through the Switch 2 without this upgrade system, would it upscale at all automatically?
uh,
Because I thought there was something about like it could maybe.
it would probably run better. I don't know if it would actually, improve the textures or the resolution or
Okay.
anything though. I guess the only way to find out would be to wait for the thing to come out and try it. But yeah, I really don't know on that one.
Everyone go to Justin's opening day. He'll have it there. So make sure you play it. And then you already mentioned, but the new big thing I guess they're dropping here for the expansion pass is going to be the GameCube. I think they only had three. Is that correct? Was it three or was it four? It was Wind Waker, F-Zero GX, which I was tickled
Mhm,
pink to see,
mhm.
and then Soul Calibur 2, which I then
I
tried to explain to my kids the debacle that was the different playable characters on Soul Calibur 2 back in the
mm,
day. But
Yeah, depending on the platform. Yeah, I remember those days. I think those were the only three. If there was a fourth one, I'm blanking as to what
Those
it
are the
was.
three. Yeah,
Yeah. But I
F-Zero
mean,
GX. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, at some point, yeah, they will be bringing other games to that, but that's a pretty meager lineup to try and like sell the expansion pass.
it's a
You know,
weird. Yeah, it's a weird
yeah,
three. Like
yeah.
Wind Waker's
Like
been done and redone so many times.
right, exactly. And it's just kind of like that's not really a selling point. If they had had even like 10
Hmm.
games, it's like okay, that's a solid starting lineup, but three is just bare bones. And there's no guarantee as to which ones they're going to bother, making available. So that's a very, I don't know, it's not a selling point for me, even though I loved my GameCube back in the day. But
Yeah,
yeah.
so GameCube's interesting. I'd just be curious what they could get the rights to put on there and what they couldn't.
Mm.
That's, like could we get finally a second way to ever play Eternal Darkness? Is that a
Oh,
possibility? Or could we just get a remaster of that game talking about your 20-year limit or
yes.
whatever?
Yeah, that one I would be fine seeing remade on modern hardware. Or hell, like Resident Evil Zero. It's not, I mean, you can play that on other systems now, but
Yeah.
be having that included in the Game Pass would be really cool. Or
Yeah.
no, like online service, not Game Pass, but you know what I mean.
I wonder,
Um,
well, Soul Calibur must be Namco, right? Is that Namco?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, Namco Bandai or Bandai
So
Namco. Yeah,
interesting that they got that one as one of their three as well.
yeah. But I can
Uh,
see a few. Like they probably didn't include Melee because I'm sure they're working on another Smash. They probably didn't include the first Metroid Prime because I'm sure they want people to buy that on on the game on the Switch itself because I
yeah.
know there's a version that you can buy there. So yeah, it'll
Yeah,
be
that's
very
true. There's
interesting.
probably.
Yeah, it'll be interesting seeing what they feel is worth releasing for quote unquote free on that service.
I also wonder if they do that because it's in, again, I only have the basic subscription on that, but it does
Yeah.
seem like they have a very purposeful, like, 2-year plan of slow drip. Like, we're going to put this, these two out for this system, and then the next week these,
Mhm.
and it's,
Yeah,
for
it's
better or worse, then you look at a year later and you're like, oh, there's like, 60 games for this thing, but not right
yeah,
at first there isn't going to be.
yeah.
So, all right, well, I think we are good. Let's talk money, Justin.
Oh
Let's talk
boy.
money, shall we?
Oh,
Where do we
money.
want to start?
I used to have money. Uh, um, yeah, let's start with the price points of both the system and
Yeah.
we talked a bit about the games, but yeah, let's start with the system. So 450 base or 449.99 base and then
Yep.
an extra $50 if you wanted it to include the digital version of the new Mario Kart. I know a lot of people are pissed at this. Because yes, does put it kind of in line with the base PlayStation 5. Um, and also the Steam Deck, which is kind of like the main competitor for this thing. You can get the base version of the Steam Deck for actually $50 less, which has the same amount of storage,
Okay.
a slightly smaller display, the 60 hertz refresh rate for, for being a handheld, which I think is the refresh rate they're going for in handheld mode on this too. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's very comparable. And Steam has a gigantic library of stuff you can buy. There's constant sales, so you can get stuff for cheap. So the Steam Deck, I think, is honestly the biggest competitor for the Switch 2. So if you compare it directly to that, in terms of like the price for the system, and that's not counting peripherals or anything like that, I could see that being a hard sell. And again, it comes back to the selling point being the first party Nintendo exclusives because you can't play those on Steam, at least not legally. Um, but yeah, so I understand why some people are upset about the price, but I kind of thought it was going to be higher, and it might still be. We'll get to that. The games, though, I think are the biggest sucker punch here because for a while, like the big thing people were afraid of was Grand Theft Auto 6. They're like, oh my God, they're gonna try to like sell it for $90 or $100 or something like that, and they're gonna try to push that towards the new norm for games. And then all of a sudden, Nintendo's like, hold my beer. Because like the starting price, at least for a lot of the first person games, is like 80 bucks, or at least for the physical version. And that's a big ask. especially in today's economy. Um, and yes, the big argument counter to that I've seen online has been like, well, in the 90s, Mortal Kombat was like $94. And that's true. But can't things maybe get better? And for a while, things had gotten really, really better in light of that. The $60 standard price point for a lot of things was great for the longest time because, yeah, I mean, if you factor in inflation, yeah, games for the last like 10 years have been cheaper than they've ever been.
Yeah.
And it's not even counting like the indie stuff that's like $5, $10 or whatever. Um, but yeah, I mean that was nice. And just saying that, oh, in the past, we had to pay so much more. That doesn't mean people are going to be happy about paying that much more in 2025 and onwards, because we've gotten so comfortable and so used to games being at a set price, a fairly reasonable price, that even 70 kind of feels like it's been a lot to swallow, because that's a significant chunk of money. That's
Yep.
you get a very nice meal out for two people and spend less than $70. You could go to see several movies and spend less than $70, even for multiple people at once. Um, and not counting concessions and stuff. There's a lot of things you can buy for $70. There's even more you could buy for 80 or 90. And having like it's amazing. Given the price of games back when we were kids, it's amazing our parents bought us anything.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, when you really stop and think about it, but we're getting back to that point now where spending $60 for like the new Mario Kart, let's say, that's, I mean, sure, for like little Timmy's birthday or whatever, that's not too much to ask. Spending 80 or 90 for, like the new Donkey Kong or something, it had better be a really fucking good game, and Timmy had better have gotten straight A's, because that's a lot of money for a lot of people these days. When rents are through the roof, and just groceries are skyrocketing in price, and just everything is costing more. Suddenly, spending 80 plus dollars for a game is a lot to ask for people, and I don't think Nintendo and a lot of like the bigger companies really realize how big of a backlog a lot of people have in terms of their gaming libraries these days. Most of us aren't really hurting for things to play. I mean, so if you're expecting us to shell out that kind of money for your shiny new thing, it had better be really frickin' shiny and really frickin' new, and it had better last, have a playtime that lasts us for like 100 plus hours if we're going to be spending that kind of money on it. So, and that's before we get to the elephant in the room in more ways than one. Um, but what are your thoughts on that before we jump into that issue?
Yeah, this is really a hard one for me because I I guess I would say as like a true Nintendo video gamer type person, I don't honestly know what my thoughts are on it yet. Um, I've had a few days to process this as we're recording, but I don't know. I think that it was going to be more than the prior systems had been. Um, and I suppose the more technologically they were going to try to have this thing do, the higher it was likely to get anyway. We're still getting the option that you're going to have a portable system, but also can play as a console at home. So that's going to take some extra, because you can't unhook your PS5 per se and take it with you to the car and sit there and play with it in the car. But this also makes me think a lot about, well, a couple things. One, what you said about like video games in the past, and like I was looking at that chart. I don't know if I shared that in the group or not, but it had like the Nintendo is 523 adjusted for inflation, and the SNES was 460 adjusted for inflation. So this would technically be the third highest system, but then the N64 was 400. The Wii U was 415. Like it's not really outside the comparative range of what their other systems have been at. And yes, it's one thing I see a lot of people on there like, yeah, but right now a lot of people are struggling for rent and groceries, and like it's not a great time with the economy and all this, all of which are true. But I think our generation, who is now basically in charge and running a lot of this shit, has a pretty fucking rosy view of what the 1980s were actually like because it was a lot of people buying a lot of shit that they didn't have money to buy because they were, feeding into pressures of society or fads or trends or technology was starting to boom and all these other things. And like,
Keeping up with
what,
the Joneses, so to
yeah,
speak.
it was, nowadays everybody's like, well, if you didn't have to buy the new iPhone every 3 years or whatever. And it's like, yeah, it wasn't like that. But at the same time, like, I don't recall a lot of people that I knew at that time having a ton of money that they were throwing around doing stuff with that was trying to make ends meet here with this. So
Yeah,
like you said, the fact that we even had these things back in the day for a lot of people in the country was really more remarkable than I would have realized at that time.
yeah, same. I mean, I rented a lot of stuff, but I mean, my game
Hmm.
collection wasn't tiny. I had a fair number of games that I owned and could play, and yeah, just thinking, some I bought myself, I saved up and whatnot. Some I got as gifts, and yeah,
Hmm.
thinking about the comparative cost between then and now, yeah, my parents were very generous towards me. So,
Yeah, fully agree. My parents never had a ton of money and they somehow pulled that off for me. And that's also weird though, when I think of like when I think back to when I was like 5 or 6, which I still can remember, like which of their friends also had the Nintendo like really early in the adoption process, right, of that system coming out. Some of which I'm like really surprised by now, but I'm like they also spent, like $550 equivalency of their money to buy this thing, which is even weirder to me now that they
yeah,
threw down that amount of money to get that. But
yeah. And I feel like
um,
I need to make a public apology to, well, at this point, just my dad, because my mom's not around anymore. I'm sorry that I badgered you into buying a 32X for me. That in today's dollars was probably like also $500, and
oh
I
my
am so
God.
sorry. Uh,
Uh, Or
but
was I?
yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah,
I don't
no,
know. So you go ahead.
oh yeah, yeah. I think you were on the basic track that yeah, things were tighter even back then than we remember. And I mean, yes, we weren't at that time. You and I weren't like the buying forces for our families, so we didn't have a full appreciation of it. And now that we are, it really does kind of put things in a different perspective. Like, say, going back to Sony for a bit, shelling out $500 for a PS5 or 700 for the fucking PS5 Pro for only a handful of good games, that is lunacy. So to really sell the Switch 2, the Nintendo is going to have to knock it out of the park with solid titles both from themselves and from other publishers and developers, because if they don't, it's going to be really hard to sway people to spend that kind of money in this day and age. And are we? Oh, go ahead.
Just it's something you said a second ago. I was thinking of last night, which is in this Mario Kart game. If you don't get the bundle, is going to be was it 80 or 90?
Yeah,
Eight,
80 I think physical and 70 digital. I
80
think.
for Mario Kart. Donkey Kong's like 70. They think whatever.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the movies, and I actually did think about that last night because, like I said, we went to see Death of a Unicorn, and for the three tickets for my daughter, my son, and I was $40. And we each bought one thing of candy and one drink at the concession stand, and that was $40. So that was $80 to go to
$80.
the
Holy
movies
shit.
last night. It was great. I had a great time with my kids, but like that would be the price of a Mario Kart game that in all likelihood we would probably play for 7 to 10 years. So,
That's
you
fair.
know, there's no way to do this in America or any place else in the world, but we're almost at the point where like things should really be priced by how good they are.
Yeah.
And we'll never get to that point because it's just not how society's going to function. But like, I'm sorry if pay less to go see a shitty movie, maybe people would go see the shitty movie.
Yeah.
Same way with games like Mario Kart costing the same as some other game that comes out that's going to be terrible. Like, yeah, then that game is a terrible price point at $80. But
Yeah.
Mario Kart itself at $80, yes, it's a lot more expensive, but I will get $80 worth out of a Mario Kart game in my family.
That's fair. And God, it shows how long it's been since I've been to the movies. But also, there's something in the back of my mind where I've plunked down like $100 for a special edition of a game that has come with like art books, sometimes figurines, soundtracks, that sort of thing. For me, that was worth it. And if I think when I bought Dark Souls 2, it came with a freaking figurine like that was like a foot tall. I think I paid 80 or 90 bucks for that, which had the game, had an art book.
Hmm.
And in my mind, that is still kind of a set as like, okay, you shell out that kind of money, you're getting something extra. And the idea of, yes, I know that was 10 years ago or whatever, whenever Dark Souls 2 came out,
Yeah.
but there's still that anchor point. And the idea of, okay, I'm suddenly spending almost the same amount, if not the same amount, and getting nothing extra for it, and possibly not even getting the game physically anymore. It was just getting like a thing that I have to put in that has a download code on it. That doesn't sit well with me. And I shudder to think of what special editions are going to cost from this point onward. Like, if the base game is 80 bucks, you want an art book, okay, it's 150. You want a soundtrack, that's 120. Yeah, that's that sort of thing. That's just I really think if the industry isn't careful, it's reaching a crisis point, and I don't want to see that happen because I have been a gamer all my life. I don't want to see another crash like what happened in the 80s and that Nintendo dragged us out of in the first place. I don't want to see them drag us back into it.
Do you think they're getting to a point? We're going off rails here, but do you think we're
Yeah.
getting to a point where like games are physically so much money to make at this point that like they have to charge a lot to try to recoup that investment, or if they can't
Yes.
sell enough, they're losing money. But then if they're losing money, they're never going to not be sitting there pumping out those remakes and remasters that you hate so much because they know they can put Resident Evil 4 out or Resident Evil 2 out in 100 forms and people just keep buying that shit like it's caviar.
Yeah. The answer is yes and no. Yes, AAA games are getting more and more and more expensive to make, but no, because they don't need to be. You don't need to see like the sweat dripping down, like the main character's brow. It might be neat to see, but focus on gameplay. Like the game I was talking about earlier, Look Outside. It's 2D. I think it may have even been made in RPG Maker. It is fun. I've enjoyed every hour I've spent in that. It was 10 bucks. I guarantee it did not cost like $200 million to make. Yes, good graphics are nice, but look at something like what was the budget on Stellar Blade? A game that came out like a year ago that was one of my honorable mentions for my most anticipated games on PC. Um, and it looks good. It's not maybe the most incredible looking thing out there, but I know it didn't cost $200 million to make. Let me see, Stellar Blade budget. But it is still a very flashy, very slick looking game, but it prioritizes style over substance, which is important. I think you can make a good looking game without it being photorealistic.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you need to charge $100 for a game to have it look just completely like real life or as close as you can get, you're doing something wrong. Um, let's see. I'm having trouble finding the budget for that, but oh, okay, here it is. I think the basic calculations because it has to go between like South Korea's currency and ours, between 19 million and 32 million dollars to make a very flashy, still very good looking action game for Stellar Blade, or like what was the Black Myth Wukong, which was made by a Chinese developer.
Bless
When
you.
say what say what you will about China, I guarantee that one did not cost like hundreds of $1 million to make. Uh, I'm just looking that up real quick here.
I was
Uh,
thinking about that while you're looking. Are digital downloads, if they're originating from a different country, are those subject to tariffs or not? I
I've been
don't
wondering about
know.
I have been wondering about that and dreading the answer. They estimate it cost $42.5 million to make that, which
Hmm.
is a fraction of the budget of like an Ubisoft or an EA developed AAA game. And I haven't played Black Myth Wukong, but I've seen footage of it. It
But
is beautiful. It is just jaw-droppingly gorgeous. And if you can, a lot of that is owed to its style, versus just. I mean, yes, it is still a very graphically intensive game, but it is very stylized at the same time. So there are approaches to making a game look good while still not spending a quarter of a billion dollars or more,
Yeah.
uh, and still having good gameplay and being able to recoup your money because you care about the experience rather than just ooh, shiny ray tracing and whatnot.
Well, that's
So
really not different than what we've talked about recently with like the video game or movies too, right? Same thing. Like you
yeah,
don't need to spend $400 million to make a movie that's good.
exactly. Yeah, so I mean, if you're going to go down that path and spend all those resources to make that game look that good, then sure, in order to make your money back, you need to charge more. But if the experience isn't there, don't expect people to shell out $90 for a game that's very mid, you know?
It'd be interesting
Uh,
to see if we do get like a backlash subculture of developers who are like, we're going to put our game out at 45.
that would be cool. I would be behind that 100%. And like my most anticipated game of the year, Clear Obscure Expedition 33, I think it's $50 and it still looks really good. And I think it comes out in like just a couple of weeks actually, so I'm very excited for that one. Um, but yeah, $50 game looks great. It looks like it plays really well and at a very fair price. And doesn't sound like it's like short or like lacking in content or anything. It just they used their resources well and they're charging a fair price for it. This it's something that can be done. It's but I think a lot of the big name developers have just lost their way, which is why Ubisoft is bleeding money, which is why EA is struggling a bit, um, because they've lost the script. Um, just make games that are fun, make games that are enjoyable and that people want to play. You'll make your
Yeah.
money back. That's what it boils down to. So, are we ready to talk about tariffs?
Yeah, I was just gonna mention there a long time ago I used to have a rule that was for every dollar I paid for a video game, I wanted to get an hour's worth of enjoyment out of it. That was like just a simple formula I used, if I buy a $60 game, I better get 60 hours worth of time out of it, otherwise I'm wasting
Mhm.
my time here.
I had a similar scheme in mind years ago too.
Yeah.
So I hear
Yeah, tariffs, boy, here we go.
you.
So
uh,
trade wars and all and Donald Trump and
yep.
China, Vietnam, Japan.
So in light of that, we don't actually know what the Switch 2 is going to cost in America.
Great update. Yes.
Because Nintendo has paused the pre-orders that they were going to have going live in 4 days initially,
Yep.
because they don't know how much they're going to have to charge now to account for this brain dead foreign policy that that the baboon that we put in a suit in the White House has decided is the law of the land now. And I I like you said, is this going to just impact physical sales of things, or is a digital project going to suddenly cost like 50% more or 40% more, or however much it ends up being, depending on where it's from? I don't know. I literally don't know. And if this was already seeming overpriced, potentially to a lot of people, what if the games start costing like $120 per cartridge?
Yeah, spoiler
Games,
to the people online. This is not a secret ploy by Nintendo to lower the prices because you're unhappy.
yeah, prices are going to go up. There's no conceivable way prices are going to lower as a result of this. They're going to go up. It's going to hurt sales. I mean, video games are going to become, if this is like a price hike across the board,
Hmm.
and like each title costs $100. Yeah, it's going to hurt the industry. It's going to hurt the hobby. They're going to be luxury items that a lot of people are not going to be able to afford anymore because it's not just the gaming industry that's going to see price hikes. It's going to be everything.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, it is an announcement of a new system at perhaps the worst possible time because Nintendo couldn't have accounted for this.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
yeah, they were like, been developing this for years. We're excited, and then all of a sudden, one of our biggest markets is saying that they're going to screw us over for literally no good reason, and we don't know how to approach this. So give us some more time, even though our new system comes out in just a couple of months. We don't know how to handle this, and I actually, despite the misgivings I have about some of what they've revealed and some of their their anti-consumer practices with the voice chat and everything, I can't help but feel for Nintendo because this is not a good place for them to be in, and it's not their fault.
Yeah, nobody wants to pay more for this stuff. Just like even if I
Right,
would never buy an Xbox, I don't wish upon the person who would want to buy the Xbox to have to pay more for the Xbox.
right. For literally no reason. I mean, this isn't going to suddenly make it so Switch 2s are manufactured in the US. That isn't going to happen.
Oh, yes, it
It's
is. There's a big conspiracy out there, Justin, don't you know? I've seen it already, and I'm not joking.
link
We're
me
th
later.
we're three
I
days into this.
uh
We already know what's going on here. No, this is yes, it's not a conspiracy. It's clearly also showing that many video gamers as well don't understand how the tariffs work yet, just like a lot of the country doesn't understand how these work.
yep.
That all being said, I will still shell out $100 to buy you Drag Drive so that you can do wheelchair basketball at your convenience. Just kidding, I will not.
Uh
So, um,
yeah, representation is important, but not stupid tariff important.
yeah.
Uh
I don't it's funny to think too, funny is not really the right word, but it's funny to think like Nintendo's going to get screwed most likely, probably the worst since they're launching something new right now
yeah.
because of things beyond their control, just like they benefited from when COVID happened, I think, and everybody was staying home for months and still everybody went and bought a Switch, it was
Yeah. Animal
world event.
Crossing, yeah. I mean, yeah, that their sales kind of did go through the roof, and yeah, it's also not their fault.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but
Uh,
hopefully the price hovers somewhere around 450 for a Switch 2. Wouldn't hold my breath though. I'd say
yep.
save up, but how are you going to save up when your savings are vanishing like the snow outside my window, which we still have because it's the UP and it's April. Um,
Oh.
but yeah, yeah, these are not fun times to be in, and I think we all could have used a bit of a distraction, a bit of enjoyment in whatever way, shape, or form we find it in. A new console could have very well been that for a lot of people, but that sort of joy is just something that the ruling party can't abide these days, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you can afford to Switch 2 and you're willing to pay that premium, more power to you. Um, but for your average Joe out there, this is, I think, going to get a lot harder to justify as a purchase. And that's not just this; it's a lot of things. So I shudder to think of how much this sort of stuff is going to cost in even like a couple months' time. We'll have to wait and see. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry to end this on a really down note, but I mean, this is the reality that we're in. We are in the dumbest timeline right now.
Yeah, yeah, not wrong.
Uh, I
I
wish I
see how
was.
many comments I have waiting for me on social media here of people yelling at me. Just
uh, but on that note, yeah, anything else on your end? I realized we were talking about this for like 2 hours now, so
no, not much else. I guess I don't know. Like, I think it's way too early to be like you should buy this or shouldn't buy this or anything of that nature. But
yeah.
I do think it's interesting. Just as a parting thought for me, I guess from a different angle here is I'll be curious how Nintendo does with this system because if you zoom out a little bit,
Mhm.
they basically have tried to provide everything video gamers wanted that was not Nintendo.
Mm.
upgraded resolution, programmable buttons on their controllers, fans to keep their devices cool, voice chat to play with their friends, opportunity to play with a mouse on their games. Like it's all these things that other video gamers would have wanted,
Mm.
but they're also not necessarily dedicated Nintendo players. So it'll be
True.
interesting to me to see, did dedicated Nintendo players want these things, or did we not know that we wanted these things until we had these things, or is this going to be a problem
Mm.
and a lot of wasted time and effort? I don't know the answer to that. I do know people were perfectly happy playing $60 Breath of the Wild 7 years ago
Yeah.
and
Uh,
still are today. So, Nintendo, if you're going to do this and it's going to be successful, I'm going to need a new Fire Emblem Three Houses entry. Make it happen somehow. I know you kill everybody in the plot, but still make it happen somehow. I want a new entry in that series. So there we go.
and if we're giving advice to Nintendo, you're really, really leaning way too hard into the camera thing. No one is going to want to have their face on the screen. Uh, like, there's a reason this is an audio podcast. No one wants to like stare at us while we're ranting about this shit for 2 hours.
Hey, just be
You're,
glad the new Switch 2 console doesn't have like a forward-facing camera you couldn't turn off.
but yeah, I mean, so it didn't. The whole like camera thing didn't work for Xbox when they tried it. It's not going to work for you. Focus on the games. That is your strong point. That's always been your strong point. The creativity, the trying new ideas, the first party stuff you had on display looked very fun. It looked engaging. It looked like something I would want to play. The pricing, leading into it with the cost of the games themselves, kind of more than I'd want to pay. The rest of it with the tariffs is out of your control, so we'll see where this lands. But
Yeah.
um, focus on the games. The gimmicky like extra bullshit is not going to be the draw you think it is. That's the best advice I can give. So the mouse does look cool if you use it well. I'll say that right now. But
I'll be curious to try it just to see what it feels like,
yeah,
how it would respond. So,
yeah.
all right. Well, I guess we're just kind of in wait and see, but obviously, if you somehow live under a rock and haven't heard that there's a new Nintendo Switch coming out, part two, definitely check out what that's all about online. You can find some good videos out there as well. Some other people talking about it beyond just us, but it'll be a change. It'll be a change for the industry. We'll see how it goes, how smooth
Yeah,
it goes, and how it sells, I guess.
yeah. I uh, I just hope the industry survives what our government is trying to do to it, along with a lot of other things. So yeah,
Maybe we could work out a deal like Donald Trump got sushi or something, and then he'd lower the tariffs. I don't
you
know.
can't you can't serve sushi well done and slather it in ketchup.
Oh, he could. He could somehow. You know it.
uh,
Goodness gracious. I don't
all
know how
right,
we're getting through 4 years of this. But anyway,
yeah.
anyway.
All right. Well,
All right. Well, this has been a lovely episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing, but also kind of agreeing tonight.
kind of, yeah,
More than I thought we would on a lot of stuff, I'll be honest.
yeah. I mean, honestly, I think focusing on whatever is good and joyful in the world that we can at this point, it's worth doing. So we'll see how this shapes up. I'm not going to be like a day one purchaser of a Switch 2 by any means, especially depending on how the pricing thing happens. But
Yep.
um, if those games are as fun as they look, the first party stuff, I mean, it might be in the cards somewhere down the line. But yeah, if you can afford it, basically don't break the bank trying to just get the next shiny new thing. We're all tightening our belts at this point. So you do what you can, you find joy where you can. I'm not going to shit all over this, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Nintendo, because honestly, we're living in kind of dark times, and I can't, in good conscience, just crap all over something that might bring people joy. Just know what you're getting into. That's the best thing I can say.
Fair enough. Now, if Joe were here, he would crap all over everything. Although Joe also owns a Switch and doesn't advertise that. So there we go. All right,
uh,
everybody. This has been the Fond Pod, the Fondcast. Friends occasionally not disagreeing. This is Cody. That's Justin. We're out of here, people. Stay safe out there.
yeah, take care of yourselves.